I've worked in theatre as well, and I think with this novel, working with actors was so important to make me understand the practice of actually how you inhabit a body. So working with actors, seeing how they took on a role, how they physically became this man or this woman, how they became this child or this adolescent, this elderly person. And I would literally sit in my room. I don't know. They do come to you. I started writing in Hector's voice as the first person in the book, but all these characters got introduced, and I started actually trying to learn the lessons from actors and actually embody them. I actually thought, how would this 40-year-old woman sit in this chair? What would be her pose? How would this 17-year-old boy walk down the street? How would this old man walk down the street? You take, I mean, I said another time with Tommy, I feel sometimes we writers are vampires. We do take, we observe and we see something and we think that would make an interesting story, or that's, I want to use that for my character. So it's all those elements coming into the work. See, look, I think two things happened to Slap in Australia. I think for a long, Australian English has been under the sign of England for a long time. It's a colonial state, and I think for a long time, this is a broad generalisation because I think there are some incredible exceptions, but I think it is true that for a long time Australian English has been English. It's one of the things that I think is, as a young kid, from a very young age, I started reading American fiction because I think American English has created its own voice, and I think Australian English is just beginning to do that. So I think that was, and I think that I'm part of a generation now. Australia had a very long, has a really complicated racial history. It still hasn't. I described it earlier to someone that the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australia is like a scab that we keep worrying that we haven't sorted through. The other thing, it had a long period of what was called the White Australian policy, which meant that only English-speaking and Northern Europeans could migrate to Australia. But I'm a generation of people who came after World War II, and so the communities I grew up with were Greek and Italian and Estonian and Slavic and Dutch, and then increasingly Lebanese and Vietnamese and now Sudanese. I mean, that's the world in Melbourne I live in. And now this generation is actually they are becoming readers. And I think that is what happened with Asylum. That it's no longer the Anglo-Australian who is writing, it's no longer the Anglo-Australian who is reading. I think for me, look, I had no idea this book was going to be so successful. I knew a lot of my readers as well beforehand. The small success I had been with really difficult works, to be honest, works that had been considered, I don't know, what are the terms anymore, but my writing has always dealt with themes of the outsider and sexuality, and so I had never thought of the language in the book. I had never thought of it as an issue until it became a successful book in Australia, and then people said, why do they speak like that? And it's like, because that's how we speak. This is, I think the language that I use in the book is the language that all these characters speak. It's sort of an authentic language. I don't think it is put on for effect. This is a language that not only the young people speak, but also the elderly people. And I think that part of it, one of the chapters is written in the voice of an elderly Greek man, and I think people get confused because Greek swearing, I don't know what Estonian and Dutch swearing are, is really colourful. So apologies, but so my mum and dad, who would always go "Gamuti Panagia," for example, "Gamuti Panagia," γιατί έκανες τον Χριστό, right? And it literally translates in English, "Fuck the Virgin Mary, why did you do that, Christos?" But that's kind of it's almost...
Wait for it, we're going to get that sound again. Just one.
It's like, but it's the colour of the language. But if I said the English word,
no wonder the Greeks are in trouble.
So you could say in Greek, but not in English.
Yes, and it's
Yes.
like because it was part of the kind of vernacular. When she heard the English word, then she thought, it was like the mixed messages. You know, fuck the Virgin Mary, how can you say fuck? Like, it's just, but in all seriousness, I think that's partly why people have been confused by the language. Bogan, do you have Bogan here?
No.
Bogan became really popular over the last 15 years to describe basically white trash, actually. So Bogan is white trash. Muzzer, do you have Muzzer here? Muzzer is what we Muzzer is what we call, well, like my Lebanese mates, for example, call me Wog, and I call them Muzzers, which means Muslims. I like to kind of feel a bit. I think that kind of language. So, and Muzzers also actually, to be honest, Muzzers also means, I don't know what the equivalent here would be, but you know those boys kind of who dress up and you know have their shirts open to here and have really big cars and.
Throw it open to the floor. What's the American English equivalent?
Guido?
Guido. I was going to say Guido.
Yeah,
Good. That's
yeah.
good. That's like particularly to Italians, but kind of used in a broader sense also.
I think that you do. I mean, even with this book, one of the characters, Harry, is his misogyny and racism is so strong, and when I inhabit his brain, you know, you do have to switch off the computer, and you also have to surround yourself with other things that are not writing, whether it's your work or your lover or your family or your friends. But it is true. The book I did before this was called Dead Europe, and part of it was anti-Semitism and trying to get into the head of what that meant, which is the first racism I learned. And there was a period where I had to give up that book for a while because it was so difficult. And just recently, I was thinking about what you were saying about paedophilia. There was 2 years ago there was a series of horrific murders in South Australia where they literally would prey on these young men and then strip them in acid and just to get their welfare check. It was just, and I thought, I wonder if, you know, I should invest. For some reason, I thought I'm going to investigate this story, and then I realised, I started reading the details, and I thought I don't want to go there. Actually, I don't need to go there unless there's something important I can do with it. Then just keep it away. A writer I love called Sasha Soldatov. He was a really underrated Australian writer, and he was a bit of a mentor to me. And very, very early on, he said to me, "Christos, you can never ever be behind everybody's shoulder who is reading your book. You know, you can't go, no, this isn't what I meant, or this is how you read it. You've kind of, once it's published, and publishing is different to, you know, when it's written. You just have to give it over. People are going to have their different reactions. I like writing about sex. I think it's really difficult to write about sex, but I really like writing about it. So I want to, as a writer, you want your challenges, and that's one of my challenges. I worry sometimes that, you know, writing about sex is really hard. I just finished Clock Without Hands by Carson McCullers, which is a novel list I love, but I'd never read it before, and I was just surprised that I'd never come across it before. I'm reading the Peter Biscuit biography, I'm going to blush, of Warren Beatty.
To complete your sex course.